Earthlings, welcome back to King's Island of Minecraft. Last episode, we did Area 72, which included Flight of Fear and, of course, Orion. It was a very interesting episode. I think it turned out really well. As you can see right here, this is the final product. But if you would like to watch that episode for yourself, you can go ahead and see the entire process. I highly recommend it. I think the video turned out really well. But today, we are finally going to be doing Mystic Timbers. Because a while ago, we said we were going to do Mystic Timbers, but then we had some issues with the measurements, so then we ended up just doing Diamondback instead, and kind of just continued with the whole park around that way instead, and then forgot about it for a while, and now that we're slowly running out of things to do, it's about time we come back and finish Mystic Timbers for real this time. But anyways, guys, without further ado, I'm just going to jump straight on into it, and I hope you enjoy the time-lapse. So hopping straight into the time-lapse, the first thing I'm doing is remeasuring where the lockers should be, and believe it or not, all of those different markers should be the same place, which, by the way, they are not. So, you know, the pain starts early in this episode. So as I'm going, I'm just kind of readjusting all the stuff that was already there, and then I'm going from there and measuring out where the actual station in the shed should be. So you could see me just kind of measuring each corner of each different section of the shed and the station, trying to give it a good layout. Which overall was fine, except for the fact that it was a little too close to the log flume, and I just knew something wasn't adding up, but we're going to get to that in a little bit here. And then remeasuring the lockers yet again, I realized that they were, again, not in the right spot. They had to be shifted back a little bit, so I had to, like, readjust the entire station, readjust the lockers, readjust the entrance to the ride, every single thing that we had already built, I had to readjust. And then here, moving on, you can see me start to actually building the layout of the queue itself, and I'm just using wool to do that. It mostly went okay, except it got a little too close to the log flume, which is why then I had to remove that wall there, and just figured I'd come back later and fix it when I get there. But moving on, I'm still just kind of laying out everything with the different colored wool. So the flat layout of the queue is the yellow wool, the station and the other shed buildings are orange, stuff like that. And then after I'm happy with the layout of the queue, I come back in with the fences and the iron bars and make it look a little bit nicer. Then moving on to the actual shed and the station, just kind of making them 3D and then adding roofs to the shed. Then moving on to the actual layout of Mystic Timbers, you can see I'm just measuring to the different curve points, and then that circle right there is where the turntable for Whitewater Canyon is going to be. And then I'm still just measuring different points from an above perspective to kind of get the layout. Just every single time that there's a different curve in the layout of the ride, I put a little post there so that I can kind of start to see the layout forming from above. Then coming back and starting from the start of the ride and just continuing until it connects in the middle. And then you can see me here connecting those different points that I just laid out, making it look nice and pretty. Just one little piece at a time. Most of the slopes weren't too bad, except for the curves. They were a little bit tricky, but nothing too bad, especially after having built Banshee and all the crap that I went through for that. I think this overall went pretty smoothly. Used a circle to kind of smooth out the turnaround back there, and then you can see me here now using different posts to kind of line out where those little two buildings back there will be. And those two buildings indeed are where the train parks when it's not being used on the track. Speaking of which, look, it's time to build the train track. Wow! This was actually very annoying because it's just super big, super annoying to deal with, and no one really cares about the train, you know, it's just there. It's really just a glorified way to get to Soak City. But, you know, I had to build it because it's there, using a lot of circles to kind of make sure that the curves look nice. And then over here, this is the big turnaround for the train, and I even ended up building the actual station for Soak City. Well, not building it, I just built the layout. But I put it where it's supposed to be, even though I'm probably never going to actually build Soak City, but it's over there in case I decide to later. Then back over here with the turntable, you can see I'm starting to build Whitewater Canyon, building the layout out of light blue wool, just kind of curving around, and then I had to delete some trees there. They were near Diamondback, just so that I had room to continue with Whitewater Canyon. But overall, this was not too bad. I'm honestly impressed with how well it turned out, considering a lot of it is blocked by the trees, and just the view of what I'm looking at from Google Earth does not look the best. But I think that it turned out really well. And then I just deleted a ton of the land there, you can see, so that I can lower it down to the ground and then continue with terraforming and everything else from there. So here I'm doing the height of all of the different points that I had earlier with Mystic Timbers. So now, like before with the top-down version, every time there was a curve, I was adding a different post. But for this, every time there's a curve in elevation, I'm adding a different point. Then that way I can come back later and combine the two to make a 3D version of the ride. You can see I dropped the entirety of Whitewater Canyon down to the ground, And then here I'm starting to finally actually build the 3D version of Mystic Timbers. So you can see I'm kind of mapping out the slope from a vertical standpoint and then combining it with the slope from the above view to make the final 3D version of the ride, just like I do with pretty much every other roller coaster that you guys have seen me build. It was a little bit tricky in some areas just so that it doesn't look super janky, and with Minecraft being blocky and everything, and with the fences, it does end up being a little bit thicker than it probably should be, but luckily with the way that I was able to build it, it turned out pretty okay. And then now, starting over at the front of the ride again, I'm reverse engineering the ground like I've been doing recently with all the other roller coasters, just kind of taking the height of the ride that I already have and measuring it from the ground to create the point where the ground should be. Then, now that I know where the ground should be, I'm kind of taking the layout of Whitewater Canyon that I have underground and layering it to make it actually appear where it should be, and then connecting all of the terraforming to those points on the ground. And honestly, I'm really happy with how Whitewater Canyon was starting to turn out already at this point. The terraforming just instantly makes the area look way better. Even though there's not really much going on, it still just made the whole area of Whitewater Canyon look a lot nicer. And then you can see that I made the little like drops where it should be so that you're constantly flowing downhill during Whitewater Canyon like it is in real life because gravity's a thing. And then I filled it all with water, and now I'm finally starting to move on into the queue for Whitewater Canyon, which was not too bad. It's just that it's in a really weird spot because the queue is basically just a really long pathway to get there, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but we're going with it. And then moving back on over here, you can see me adding some of the smaller details to Whitewater Canyon. Like I used some barrels in order to make the little agitators that make the water rough. And then here I'm finally starting to build the more detailed stuff for Whitewater Canyon, like that building that's over by the turntable, and then all the different outpost towers where the ride ops will sit and make sure everything's going smoothly, and occasionally squirt you with water. Now I'm working on some maintenance paths that go under Mystic Timbers and over Whitewater Canyon, just kind of making those pathways look nice and adding some different detail here and there for the part that goes near the waterfront. You know, adding some sand and gravel and dirt and all that jazz. And then now I'm finally starting to add rails to the layout of Mystic Timbers, and then I'm going to come back in just a little bit and make it wider and put those fences on it. You know, finally just adding that detail to Mystic Timbers that it makes it look a little bit more complete. Just all the way up and down, adding those fences, making each part of the ride 3 blocks wide so you have the rails and the fences on either side. And even without the supports, it already is starting to look a lot more complete. Speaking of supports, look at that! We're building supports! I'm also using stone to kind of support it under areas that either like a pathway goes under or water over there. You can see here I'm building stone to kind of like support it under there, you know. Because in real life it would be like iron, like I-beams that are supporting it, but stone slabs is the best I could get in that situation. But basically anywhere that a pathway or Whitewater Canyon goes underneath Mystic Timbers, I'm putting those slabs there to support the ride. And then I'm back over here making some supports for the Mystic Timbers shed, and then moving backwards and kind of creating the supports for the actual ride itself for the parts that aren't just over the water. I'm not starting the actual 3D supports yet, the ones that kind of like stick out on curves, but I'm just doing all the default supports, and then I'll come back to the other stuff later. And then coming back to the station, we're finally going to put a roof on that station. I also measure out where the actual booth where you can get your photos from is, and then I put the dry box in there, the elevator, and then the exit, just kind of all that stuff down there. And then now I'm finally starting to build the supports that kind of stick out to the side during all the different curves. There are a lot of them because this ride does bank and hit those corners pretty hard a lot, and it definitely makes the ride just look a lot more complete from a building perspective. Like, looking at it now, it just looks nice already, and then putting in those concrete footers using stone blocks, and then coming back over here, finally connecting the Whitewater Canyon pathway, the queue, to the entrance. And then I also finally changed the color of Diamondback supports, like they're yellow right now, and then boom, now they're not. Because I realized that in the past year or so, I forget when they actually did that, but they finally repainted Diamondback supports, so now they look a little bit more not McDonald's colors, I guess. Anyways, back over here, now we're finally actually starting to build the supports for the sides, adding those using just wool, and then I'm going to come back later and use World Edit to just replace all the wool blocks with oak fences. Just like that. And then adding those footers like I said before, and then coming back over here and doing the same thing over here by the shed, adding the final little bit of 3D supports, and then adding that little housing for the, gears and everything that makes the lift work down there underneath the base of the lift, and then adding in these fences for the lower parts of the ride, and then adding in that final little observation area for Whitewater Canyon. And then you can see I'm kind of starting to map out the pathway over there by the lift, but we'll come back to that later. Moving on over here into the other areas where we need to put fences near the low-to-the-ground sections of the ride. Just kind of finishing it off. And then making our way back over here towards the lift, where I'm going to be finally adding in those pathways that you saw me measure out earlier. Now I'm actually making them exist properly and look nice. Adding in the staircase to get up into the shed area from the outside. And then you can see me over here making the camera over there where it takes your picture, and then adding the other camera over here that is not taking your picture but is just there for ride operator purposes. And then I'm continuing to make this area look nicer by adding in more gravel near the waterfront. And then moving on, adding some final finishing touches over here into the Whitewater Canyon area, including those lampposts over there, which I also am placing all over here. So every single one of these lampposts is pretty much copy and pasted over the walkway to get into Whitewater Canyon. But I think they turned out pretty nice. And then now it's time to build the train track. I ended up using stone stairs because I thought it looked a little bit like rails. Still not sure how I feel about it, but I think it's probably the best option I could get. Now moving on over here into actually building the sheds that house the engine and the cars for the train. There's not really much I could do with it, but I think they turned out well, I guess, whatever. Just kind of have to be there. And then moving back over here, I realized that this area, this big flat section, is actually a big ditch with a bridge that the track runs over, and I don't know how I missed it the first time, but here we are. So I'm terraforming again and then adding that bridge right there. I then realized that I actually wanted the track to be in the ground instead of on top of it because it just kind of looked clunky being on top of it. So then I went through the entire thing, lowered it all a block, and then used this red wool to add different gravel around it. Then I added this little landscaping thing over here in the back where there's some tiny trees and whatever. Then I come back over here and add the concrete that's in this section along with this guardrail that keeps anyone from falling into the water. And then you can't see me right now, but I'm actually getting to all the shed detail, which I'll show later. And then moving on to the outside of the station where I'm going to add these tiny little trees and tiny details throughout the queue. And then finally, because it is the end of the episode, you guessed it, it's tree time! My favorite part of the episode, where we go around and put trees and still more tree. I don't know why there's so many trees, but they're there, so we put them there. But yeah, I know I say it every episode, but the greenery really just brings the whole scene together and makes it look so much nicer. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Mystic, Whitewater Canyon, all of that stuff, I think it all turned out really well, and I hope you agree. And that's going to do it for the time lapse, but just like last episode, before we go into the POV comparison, I want to show you some of the details around the station area, just so that you can see some of the smaller things that you can't see from the time lapse. Just like some of these signs that have all the detail on it, no parking, fast lane, all this stuff that you can't really see from the time lapse, but it is there. And in the station, you got some of these crates over here in the back corner, some different signs over here that say miscellaneous things in real life. And then I even detailed the entire shed, so as you go in through here, you can see that, like, here's the transfer track. On the other side of this wall is where you actually have the next train where it will be sitting there. And then you have all the little details off to the side, all the little vines and the different things just hanging out. Even put the little e-stop here, and then here's the little light that blinds you as you come in so you can't see into the actual shed. Then as you pull through into the actual shed, you get to see some of the more detailed things that I put in here. Like these right here are supposed to be the screens that actually show you whatever monster's coming after you this time. And then you got the Coke machine over here. This is supposed to be like where the radio is. All these different signs are supposed to be where it would say, like, it's in the shed, don't go in. And then these slabs on the chains are supposed to be the little lights that swing as you pull through at the end after the shed sequence is finished, and then you pull right back into the station. So yeah, everything else you pretty much saw because there wasn't as much detailed stuff for this episode, but I just wanted to make sure you got to see some of the details, especially in the shed, just to show that even though you can't really see it, I did put the effort in and try and build it as accurately as I possibly could. But anyways, guys, without further ado, we're going to jump straight into the POV comparison, so just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. Welcome back. How was it? Awesome, awesome. Sounds amazing. Woohoo. Anyways, please let me know in the comments down below how accurate it was. I think it turned out pretty well. This definitely was a bit tricky over an episode just because there's a lot of trees and terraforming was a bit crazy for a while because of the fact that not only was this a Mystic Timbers episode, but it was Mystic Timbers along with Whitewater Canyon and all that jazz intertwining with itself. And yeah, you know how it is. But just let me know how accurate it turned out. I think it was pretty good. But anyways, guys, that's pretty much going to do it for this episode. I am so sorry it took me this long to get back to this series. I just had a lot of other stuff going on in my life and then kind of forgot about it for a while. And then I saw some comments that were reappearing and I just felt so bad for those people that wanted to see the series continue, so I decided to hop back on, give it another shot, and I promise I will finish this series, and hopefully it will not take me another year before I upload the next video, but I guess we'll have to just wait and see. But after this episode, the next thing we're going to be doing is going back over and trying to redo Planet Snoopy now that they've added all the Camp Snoopy stuff, or the other thing I have left to do is way over there, I have to do Adventure Port. So basically, those two different areas is what we have left, and then pretty much going to be done with the park, because unless you guys really want to see Soak City, but I'm currently not planning on doing Soak City, so basically the only two things we have left to do is editing Planet Snoopy to include all of the new Camp Snoopy stuff and Snoopy Soapbox Racers, all that jazz that's over here now, and adding Adventure Port over there. So those are pretty much the only two things we have left to do. Let me know which one you want to see in the next episode in the comments down below. But anyways, if you did enjoy this episode, please let me know by leaving a like, commenting, and subscribing. Thank you guys so much for watching, and without further ado, I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.